What's going on, guys? Master Coach and Education Director Aaron Guyette here. I'm with the LivingFit Show, and I have the incredible honor, the absolute pleasure to have Joel Jamieson, straight out of the Northwest, just like myself. But he is a mover and a shaker in the fitness industry. I mean, he's been boots on the ground. He's been 40,000 foot view. He's been all over the map, helping athletes, humans, just get better through normal physiological function. So Joel, thank you so much for hopping on today on the LivingFit Show. Love having you.
Yeah, no problem. I'm happy to come on and talk to another fellow Northwesterner while I'm at it.
Yeah, exactly. So what got you into fitness? And then we'll probably, steer out of even just getting basically into fitness, but what got you into like the physiology and really trying to understand and nerd out on fitness so that you can help people get better?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I think in my earliest days, I remember, 5th, 6th, 7th grade, seeing my brother lift weights. And, my brother was kind of a bully, to be perfectly honest with you. And I saw him lifting weights and getting stronger, and I didn't want to miss out on that. So, I kind of asked him to show me how to lift weights. And I remember the old days, we had these sand plates. I mean, literally, they were just these plastic weights for the people that are my age that, were filled with sand. And then there was the Bowflex, right? There was all these things. So, I think early on I just was drawn to it to try to keep up with my older brother. And then eventually I played football in middle school and high school. So I lifted weights to, just get better at football. But it's really been something I've been passionate about since I was a young age. I just, I took to it. A lot of kids play video games and I did that as well. But lifting weights and training was just something I was really kind of into from a very early age and always have been.
Yeah, awesome. And so then, as you get older, was it the age thing? It's like, okay, I can't keep up with my old self, so let me help these other young whippersnappers keep up, or was it just got like into the nerdiness and the science and understanding what's going on? How did you go from, I'm sure obviously you look great, you look like you're still in shape. But how did you go from that to, okay, I'm going to bring fitness to the table and help these people understand how to get better?
Yeah, look, I think a lot of this comes down to I'm impatient by nature, and fitness is a slow process. And so I was always thinking, really, I remember even just being in high school, really kind of nerding out from an early age. And at those days, that just meant like reading fitness magazines all the time, or read the bodybuilding magazines. And like I said, mostly it's because I just want a short circuit. I want a shortcut. I didn't want to take, I read these things that say, oh, it's going to take you a year to gain, 6 pounds of muscle. And that seemed terribly slow and inefficient to me. And I wanted to try to speed it up, right? So I think a lot of it's just been driven by that idea of like, how can we speed this up? Because the natural physiological processes are fairly slow. So, in high school, I studied a lot. In college, I played football very briefly, and I just, didn't quite have what it took to play collegiately at the D1 level, and had a lot of injuries, so I hung it up. But I was always fascinated with the football side, the performance side, I should say, of training. And I got a quick story. I remember I was in high school, I was a senior, and I felt like I studied quite a bit and read a lot of magazines. And then this one day, this guy named Bill Gillespie, who's a coach at the University of Washington, came in, and he gave a talk about training. And I was like, what is this program? Because I was used to, bodybuilding splits and arms, legs, bis, tris. And he was putting out this program that was just completely different than anything I'd ever seen. And it was my first strength and conditioning program. It was not a bodybuilding program. And that just really opened my eyes that there was this whole other realm of training that I hadn't been exposed to. And so when I went to the University of Washington, where he was actually the strength coach, and saw the program, I was just instantly drawn to this idea of organizing training in a way that was completely different than I'd ever read the bodybuilding magazines. And that really took me down the journey of using conditioning and strength training and building performance out of it, and helping athletes reach their goals, that were maybe different than just trying to, gain or lose muscle mass. So they actually could improve their performance and stay healthier. So it was, kind of my first entry into the coaching side of things. It just went from there.
Yeah, it's so interesting that we talk about this a lot. Marcus and I talk about this a lot when we do interviews with each other on the LivingFit Show. Like when you just have a hammer, then like basically everything is a nail, even if it's not a nail, right? You're just looking for things to hammer. So it's really interesting that, as the more one learns, the more one realizes there's more than one way, and maybe the way that we were doing it, that, all of our confirmation biases and echo chambers and whatever kept us there, right, might not be the best approach. It's really, really interesting. So have you always been in the Northwest then? Did you grow up around the same area that you ended up in university?
Yeah, I did. I grew up, in the Seattle area. I went to University of Washington. Like I said, I've traveled quite a bit. I've been fortunate through my career working with athletes to, travel everywhere from Japan to Australia and Europe and lots of different places. And these days I spend some of the winter, about not half the year, but 4 months in Hawaii out the North Shore. That's really my winter getaway, and I love the beach and that area, the people and the food. So I'm starting to move a little bit more away from the Northwest, but home is always home, and I do like it here. It's a great place, but it's been a coaching ground as well. I've put down 18 years of training people here and being in the area, so it's always good to be home. But I have been able to travel a lot and see a lot of different areas of the fitness industry. It's interesting to see how Japan, and I've traveled a lot in China and spoken and lectured quite a bit all throughout China. So it's really fascinating to see the different aspects of strength and conditioning as you get outside your local area into other parts of the U.S. and the world as well.
So here's a fun fact talking about the world. So did you go to Australia when Mighty Mouse went and competed in Australia against Ian McCall? Or were you?
I can't remember if I was at that one. I know it sounds silly, but I've been at so many fights over the years. Sometimes I can't remember if I was at them or if I watched them. I think I was at that one. I think that was in Australia when I went to. But I'm not 100% sure, but the odds are that I was at that one. Yeah.
So interesting, right? You were training Mighty Mouse. We were actually in Southern California training Ian McCall for that fight, and clearly, Mighty Mouse had it. Like it was really touch and go for the first couple of rounds, but then come the end or whatever, it was pretty clear. Unfortunately for us, right? Clear, fortunate for you, but just really interesting that we've crossed paths from a programming and training standpoint.
So was that the first one or second one?
I think that. Ooh, that is a good question. Now I'm starting to get it. Was it the first?
Because the first one was the draw, and then the second was Mighty Mouse's pretty clear win. So the interesting thing about that one, is so in that fight, that was the first time that Mighty Mouse didn't perform in the third round the way that he should have. The interesting thing was he went on a low carb kick, and he wouldn't listen to us that you need to actually train with some carbs when you're performing at the level he was performing at. And so he kind of went down this path of trying to train on a very low carb diet, and it was not ultimately the best solution for him. So then we got him doing some recarb up at least, and he tried that during fight week. It just nutritionally, that fight was a disaster for him. Unfortunately, I think that was probably the reason he didn't perform as well as he should have. In the rematch, he actually ate and listened to us a little bit better. But sometimes athletes, they get this idea in their head, and they just kind of go down this path that is, not what you're telling them they should be doing, and sooner or later they learn. So I think that was.
No, yeah, you're right. It was the touch and go one the whole time, and it was a draw. And I think we thought Ian won, and because of course confirmation bias or whatever, like you want your guy to win.
Yeah. It was a good fight.
Yeah, and it was a really good fight. But then the next one, it was clear, right? The next fight, it was just absolutely clear. I was just crushed.
And that was, like I said, it was just, like I said, that was the one where he just literally kind of got this idea in his head that he wanted to train lower carb, and he was convinced it was going to be less inflammation. He kind of went down this idea that we're like, I'm not sure that you quite understand what you're doing here, DJ. Let's try that. You kind of nudge people, like he's generally receptive to those things, but he just tried this nutritional strategy, and it didn't pay off for him. I think he learned quickly that was not the right way to approach it, and changed dramatically for the second time around.
Yeah, what a great way. And the thing is, he's a pretty humble dude. It seems he's pretty coachable. Right? And so,
he is. He definitely is.
Yeah, and so what a great way to learn, right? It's like, okay, like you got to draw, so let's fix this.
Yep. Let's fix this. Yep. So
and so that's. I think this is probably a great segue into looking at physiology. A lot of times it's like, either bodybuilding or just like, I'll just train strength and then I'm going to, crush in the UFC, or like for me being in the military and I'm going to crush in the military. It's like, well, there's a lot more things happening than just strength. And then it's like, okay, well, I'll just do these perfect programs, but I'll sleep like crap. I'll eat like crap. I'll do whatever I want. And maybe some of that comes out of our 20 stupid-year-old years, right? Where we feel like we're invincible, maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's a much bigger approach that you're taking with your athletes, that you're taking with the books that you've written, the programs that you've developed, right? All of that stuff. You're not just looking at, here's the 8 exercises that are going to help you crush. It's a much more 40,000 foot view, right? As opposed to
Yeah, I mean, there's kind of two things that happened fairly early in my career. I was really fortunate. The first one was I opened up my gym next to AMC Pancration, and it turned out to be, really the mecca of combat sports. And Matt Hume, their head coach there, is really, in my mind, the greatest MMA coach that's ever lived. And so, just really fortunate I opened up my gym next to him. I wish it was by some grand design, but I just kind of picked that location, and it happened to go there. So very early on, I was exposed to combat athletes, and not just your average guy trained for a local fight, but literally guys trained for world titles in the first year of me being open. So I had to really sink or swim there. And the biggest thing I realized was how little I knew about conditioning. And as soon as I started trying the sport myself, I realized the strength was not the limiting factor for a lot of those guys, because I was way stronger. I mean, this time I was benching 4 plates and squatting 5 plates, and these guys could do like 5 pull-ups and they could barely bench their body weight, and they were just manhandling me after 30 seconds. Yeah. So you kind of look in the mirror and you go, well, strength is clearly not helping me out any, and so maybe that's not the only part that I need to help them improve. And so that really forced me to dive into conditioning head first and learn a whole other side of the game that I was completely ignorant about. I mean, I would never have guessed back then that conditioning would be something I'd be known for, because it was just something I wasn't very knowledgeable about, and I didn't have a ton of experience in. So that was a really big thing that happened that just shaped my career, because I went down that path. And then the second thing was I was introduced also to heart rate variability back around like 2000, 2001, a long, long time ago, before anybody really knew what heart rate variability was. And it was this $35,000 Russian system where you connect a bunch of electrodes into a laptop, and it was complicated. It was a bunch of data. But I instantly saw that this thing was the future of fitness, because it was giving me insight into what was actually happening inside these people's bodies. And I figured, as a coach, that's going to be valuable information. I need to figure out what my program's actually doing to them. And the biggest thing I found out was my program was only one small piece of a much larger puzzle. And it was how much they were sleeping or not sleeping. It was how mentally stressed they were from work. It was what kind of foods they were putting in their body. It was all these other factors that were playing such a dramatic role in their results. And I was able to see that with HRV. And so it really took me down this bigger path that you just mentioned, of looking at training as one piece of the puzzle, but also considering the other pieces and how they all fit together, and recognize that my job as a coach isn't just to write workouts, it's to help people change their performance or change their lives or whatever it is they're trying to accomplish. And you really can't do that if all you're doing is writing sets and rep exercises. You're just missing so much of the physiology behind the recovery process as it drives the adaptations, it drives health and wellness. And so that really took me down that path of trying to open up my viewpoint to see a much bigger picture of human physiology, fitness, wellness, performance, and all of that in between. So, those two pieces, training high-level combat athletes and having to understand the demands of that sport relative to, other sports they've worked with, and then having to look at this big picture of how people's lives drive their fitness and drive their health, really shaped a lot of the things I've built from there.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things I think I want to have you unpack for us. And first is this idea of conditioning. And so, I think the fitness industry is probably like most industries, like we've done a great job of bastardizing words, right? Like taking words and then making what the meaning was mean something else. Because me, it's like, well, you can condition strength and you can condition power, you can condition. But when you're saying conditioning, you're speaking about something different, correct?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, there's the problem with fitness is there is no universal language, right? We can say the same thing and we can mean something totally different, and that's the problem, because when people are talking about the same thing, sometimes they're talking about the same thing and sometimes they're not. So again, I don't want to create my own definition, but the way that I view things is we can look at fitness, and I would define fitness as measurables, like how many pull-ups you can do, how fast you can run a mile and a half, how well you can do certain things. These are physiological qualities that create the potential to do something, right? And those are fitness qualities. We can measure those, and they're tangible. We can have standards, but those things don't always define how well someone's going to perform in a competition, all things being equal. We know there's lots of people that are in the weight room that perform great, and they go out in the field and they perform terribly. Well, why is that? So I look at conditioning as the application of fitness to achieve some end. And in a fighter's case, that's to go out and win a fight. Football players to go out and perform all 4 quarters and execute their skills. For the human being who's just trying to look and feel their best, it's the application of fitness to be able to do that. It's to be able to look and feel your best and live a long, healthy life. So I just look at conditioning as an application of fitness. I mean, unless you are training CrossFit where your goal is to perform well in those fitness events, that to me is conditioning for CrossFit would be the ability to do that. But I look at the average person, they just want to live a long, healthy life. The athlete wants to perform well in sport. And so conditioning is how you're able to use your fitness in a way that allows you to accomplish whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. And so that's the way I look at it. And that's typically the way I would define it and share when I'm talking about it.
Yeah, I like that. I really like that definition. And so then would you say that as you program, not only in the weight room, sets and reps and all those things and weights and whatever, but also outside of the weight room and sleep and nutrition and all these things, that drives adaptation, and adaptation drives conditioning. And so, okay, if we're keeping the end in mind, how are we conditioning this person for their particular end goal or whatever it is that they're trying to go after? Boom, and then we work backwards. Would that be fair?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I look at kind of 3 major pieces that we can talk about. We can talk about the energy systems, which are obviously a huge piece of this because energy systems drive everything, since that's your metabolism providing the working fuel your muscles need. There's movement, and movement's hugely important, obviously, for skill and for efficiency of energy expenditure. And there's the mental performance side. Now, I don't just mean mental toughness, but having the mental fortitude and have the mental skill sets to know when to expend energy. And that's a huge piece of combat sports, and pacing and understanding yourself, your limits, and being aware of your body's own capabilities and staying within those. And so I put those kind of 3 big pieces of movement, mental performance, and metabolic conditioning as what's driving the actual conditioning in someone's potential to perform at a high level. And then of course there's the other pieces of your lifestyle, right? Your nutrition, your sleep, your mental stress, your regeneration. All those things are what are allowing you to improve your conditioning over time through the training and recovery processes. So I look at things in terms of those 2 big pieces, those 2 big processes that happen.
Yeah, I love that. So then, and I know you're trying to develop. You've not only developed a little bit of language, but mainly like systems around this to give people structure, whether it's an end user that's trying to get better or stronger or faster, or, whatever the case might be, or it's a coach that's trying to get their clientele to this level, whatever their clientele might be, whether it's general population that's just, like you said, trying to look better, feel better, move better, or it's an athlete that's trying to get the W in whatever sport or realm, to include, and maybe even we can even talk a little bit about, that combatives or combat athlete, not just in UFC where they're competing, but combat athletes in whether it's a cop that might get into a scuffle or something like that, or it's a military guy, special operations, or just basic infantry or whatever, to be able to do their job better. You've created some pretty incredible systems so that people can learn, but I know that there's this right now in my mind's eye, it's pretty vague understanding of this thing called Morpheus. So I'd like to tap into that a little bit more and try to bring some vividness to it, to understand like what it does, why it's going to be important, how it can be a huge game changer for us, especially, and I think we need to get into HRV as well in order to kind of understand some of this stuff too.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, the big picture of Morpheus is built on just how our human bodies were designed. And we were designed to be put under a stress, and the stress is really anything that challenges our metabolism and makes us produce essentially more energy to meet some sort of immediate demand. And then recovery, and the recovery part is where the energy is put back that was used during the stress, and it's where the body adapts and becomes better coping with stress the next time it happens. And that's all life is a series of things that stress our bodies out and a chance for us to recover from those stressors effectively. If we manage that properly, we get in better shape, we live longer, we feel better, we move better. If we don't, we slowly fall apart and we perform poorly, we get diseases, we die earlier, all the bad things happen. And I don't care if you're talking about an athlete or you're talking about just your average human being, our body is just exposed to stress over and over again, and how we cope with that is the ultimate thing that matters. So with that in mind, the whole point of Morpheus, as you mentioned, is to help people see the big picture of how their body is under stress and how their body is recovering from that stress and where they are on this journey towards either improved performance and wellness or decreased performance, injury, and poor health. And that's really the only two trajectories you can go down in the long run. And so we do that by looking at all the pieces I mentioned. So we track activity using a variety of wearables from Fitbits to Apple Watches. We look at sleep in the same guise. So if you have an Apple Watch, a Fitbit, a Oura, we pull sleep data in. We look at heart rate variability using our own device, which is the Morpheus Recovery Band. And then we look at training using really any chest strap or optical sensor you want to use for training. And what we do is we take all that information, these data points coming in, and we turn into two things. The first is a recovery score, which is just a gauge of how well recovered your body is and how ready it is to train again or push it under more stress. And then second thing is some personalized heart rate zones to help you manage your intensity correctly. So we give you a low intensity zone, which is blue for recovery, a moderate intensity, which is green for conditioning, and a red intensity zone, which is your high intensity or overload zone. And again, those zones are going to change based on where you're at. If your recovery is lower, those zones are going to shift compared to if your recovery is higher. So it's meant to help you manage the recovery of training by training in the right heart rate zones each day. And so the way I talk about Morpheus is it's a recovery management system. So it pulls in all these big pieces around recovery. It shows you where your recovery is maybe lacking or why it may be not what it should be, or it shows you when it's high. And then it helps you adapt your intensity to your training. It helps you see the big pieces of sleep and everything else that's affecting it. So, it's a recovery management system. And I think it's important because, again, all these things, like I just mentioned, derive how well your body responds to training and other types of stress, and ultimately determines how successful or unsuccessful you are as a result of that. And the problem right now is people have been using wearables for 10, 15 years in some cases. Yeah. But I don't think they've fundamentally changed the way that most people approach their fitness. I think they provide little pieces here and there, and people go down this rabbit hole of tracking them for a while, but then they lose focus because they're not really helping you put together all the big pieces of recovery. They're not helping you train in a smarter way based on what your lifestyle is doing or not doing. And then secondly, coaches and gyms and physical therapists and other people involved in the industry, they don't have access to any of this data. So if I'm a coach now and I train somebody and they walk outside the gym, they're block box. I have no idea what happens between when they leave my gym and when they come back to me. And that could be a day, it could be 2 days, it could be a week. And the reality is that week or those few days, those hours, whatever, those drive the results. Because if somebody's recovering well, they're going to see good progress from my program. If they're not sleeping, they're not eating correctly, they're stressed out of their minds from work or family or whatever, then they're going to shoot themselves in the foot. They're not going to see the same results. Yeah. So the problem is my success or failure as a coach depends on what happens outside the workouts. And if I don't have any insight to that, I don't have any idea what's going on, there's no accountability there, my job is basically up to the person to go out and do the right things. And that doesn't always happen. So, I think we need to take coaching. Really, to me, a lot of fitness it's in the dark ages in a lot of ways that we compare it to other technology things. I mean, we can go online and order stuff from any place in the world overnight. We have cars that are driving themselves. We have all these technologies out there that have changed. I mean, we're talking across the country right now. I can talk across the world on different platforms, but I have no idea what happens to my clients once they leave the gym, right? Even though the data is there. They have Apple Watches, they have Oura Rings, they have Garmin, they have these devices are out there, the data's there. It just hasn't been given to people in a meaningful way that can actually transform the way that we coach, the way that we transform how we approach fitness for ourselves. So that's really the 10,000 picture view of what Morpheus is and what we're trying to do with it.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, that's not a hard sell at all to any coach, any trainer, any person that understands that, right? Like they all deal with that constant dilemma, that constant issue of, well, I can't control my client when they're out. I can give them advice, it's a hope and a prayer. It's okay, I wish they come back and they did it right, and then we're going to start to see results. But then, okay, we're not seeing results, so now what? So I would say then, or I would ask, how do you reframe for the type A or intensity junkies that are out there that they hear the word recovery and they almost like you can see like a visual, like, ugh, like they're so against this idea of recovery, which you and I both know that is where the magic is happening. Most coaches, I think, even coaches that don't have a ton of education still at least understand, right, this concept. So then what about the type A's? What about the people that it's like, no, I just want to get the burn. I want to get the sweat. I want to be intense. How do you reframe that? What's a way to help them see this as a tool for their toolbox that's a necessity, not just, oh, yeah, it would be kind of cool. It's like, no, this is necessary for your success.
Sure. Yeah, look, I think you always got to kind of meet people where they're at. And I'm always a fan of coaching them down their own path versus telling them what to do. So the first thing you talk about, are they actually making progress? How are you measuring progress? How do you feel on a daily basis? Do you have any injuries? Because I don't care who you are. If you are that type A, I'm going to smash myself into the ground all day long. Unless you're 20 years old, you're going to start to suffer the consequences. And a lot of those people already have nagging injuries, and they just kind of keep going. They keep going until they ultimately end up completely broken. So a lot of times you can kind of just get them to have a little introspective, talk with them and say, how do you feel on a daily basis? Like, do you have any nagging injuries? What sort of progress are you making? When is the last time you hit a PR? And you can kind of a lot of times walk these people down this path of like just realizing like what they're doing now maybe isn't working as well as they'd like it to. Like, yeah, they're smashing themselves, they're sweating every day, but are they actually getting better? And how are they measuring that? Do they actually know they're getting better? And so a lot of times it's starting at that point and being like, look, let's try this. Give me 30 days and let's see how this approach works. I want you to try these things, or I want you to start using Morpheus. I want to just give this a shot. And that's really the way to approach a lot of people that are type A. If you try to tell somebody, hey, what you're doing is wrong, you're an idiot, like let's just stop this, let's do this instead, that's not going to work, for most of them. And you're not telling them, like, hey, yeah, especially type A, that's not going to work. But if you frame it from the standpoint of like, look, you said you're having some nagging injuries here and there. You said it's been a while since you've hit some PRs. Give me a shot. Let's try this for 30 days. And here's why I think it's going to work. And let's see what happens. And 99% of the time, they see better results. They do hit PRs. Their injuries do start to get better. They feel better. And then they're obviously much more receptive to it. And the other thing is if you're working in a gym setting, you can use other clients' examples that, might have been similar to them in nature, other type of personalities you've worked with, and talk about some of the results they've seen. And that's where having success stories and having credibility as a coach and having, just proof that what you're saying works comes in handy, obviously. But a lot of times like this, it's just framing the problem the right way and getting people to walk themselves down the path and see the potential versus trying to tell them what to do, which is ultimately not going to be the most successful approach for most of those types of people. But in my experience, like I said, once you show people results, you show them the money, so to speak, they want to keep buying and they'll walk themselves down that path. And I also talk about what is recovery, right? Recovery is not sitting your ass doing nothing. Recovery can be very proactive. There's lots of things we can do to improve your recovery that's not just passive, but active, and you can start to walk them down that path. So I'm not necessarily telling you to do less. I'm telling you to do different ththings. And I'm telling you to work on a different area of fitness, not just train less and do nothing. So, I think if you look at just those different pieces, I've usually gotten a really high level of buy-in. And like I said, you see results, money talks, right? That's also what you have to do. You give someone results and they'll keep listening.
1000%. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So then is this like an app on a phone, or do you have to buy a separate device, or is it on a website, or how does somebody access this Morpheus measurement protocol? Sure. Like you said, and it's basically giving like two key numbers for you to be able to adjust your programming and change, kind of what you're doing, right?
Yeah. So for each person, Morpheus is an app for Android and iOS. So it's just a mobile app. And then, like I said, we pull in sleep, activity, and training data from a variety of devices. And so even if you don't use our device, so we have the Morpheus recovery band that measures your recovery, and then measures your HRV, and then use that for recovery. And then we have a chest strap for training as well. But even if people want to use their own, like I said, activity, sleep, the other training devices, they can connect really any of those to Morpheus to see the big picture. And our devices are not meant to be worn 24/7. We're not competing with Apple Watch or Garmin, or we're not competing with those devices. We just want to make those devices more effective and turn that into the recovery score and heart rate zones. So really, it's download the app. It's basically tell Morpheus what you want to use to track your activity and your sleep and your calories, and then it's basically just using that on a daily basis, along with, again, our own device if you want to use it for the HRV part of things. And then for the coaches that want to see all this data, we have an iPad app, and that's the Morpheus coaching platform. So they would just license, basically get a subscription for that. They download the app from the App Store, and then all their data from their clients is pulled into it every day. So they can see how people are sleeping. They can see what their 30-day changes have been, their 30-day average sleep has been. They can see what their HRV has been. They can see their heart rates from training. They can see all this data from all their clients, regardless, like I said, of what devices they're using. So even if 10 of their clients say, I don't really want to measure HRV and I want to use a Morpheus band, well, they probably still have an Apple Watch, or they have a Fitbit, or they have a Garmin, they have something else, and we can pull all that data in and share with the coaches. So
All right, so they've got Morpheus, and let's say they said, "Oh, I don't want to measure HRV." What would be a reason? Because I know that you've studied HRV way more than the average person, and you understand it at a much deeper level. What would be the benefit for measuring HRV over some of the other metrics that we could pull, like whether it's resting heart rate or resting heart rate in the morning, or I mean, any of the other measurements, even just reps and sets and volume and things like that, right?
Yeah, I mean, sure. HRV is the best insight we have into how the body's recovering because it's measuring activity of the parasympathetic nervous system, which is literally the rest and digest and recovery system of the human body. And so heart rate itself is kind of the end result of that, but heart rate variability is the underlying physiological processes that are happening that are driving that. So it is sensitive, meaning it is able to detect things on a quicker basis and a more proactive basis. So you're able to get that insight. It's more effective. It's an easier tool to just get that deeper level physiological measurement. And the nice part about it, it is just a couple minutes a day. And I'll talk about this real quick. There's a lot of systems out there that have you wear a device 24 hours a day, and they just kind of generate an HRV number. But the reality is they're generally speaking inaccurate because you want to measure HRV at specific time frames where you compare your body each day over time. It's like basically here's the equivalent of what they're doing. It'd be like weighing yourself every hour, every day. Well, I really just want to see how my weight's changing on a daily basis. I don't need to weigh myself every single hour, every single day. I'm not going to see much but curves and valleys. Like I want to just have a standard baseline comparison. So I'm going to weigh myself. It'll be first thing in the morning before I've eaten, right? It'll be a standard time to see what my weight's actually doing because otherwise we have too much noise in the system and it becomes less accurate. HRV is the same way. We want to be very specific about how we measure it, and we want to standardize that. And if you're just wearing something that's kind of periodically taking measurements, you're not getting a very accurate snapshot of what your heart rate variability is doing on a daily basis. So we're not really seeing a good picture of that. And that's really what most of the research that's been done over the last 50 years has been based on, is these daily snapshots of HRV, not these 24-hour periodic measurements are just kind of behind the scenes. And I know a lot of apps do that, but again, the reality is to get the most out of HRV, you do need to spend 2, 3, 4 minutes a day measuring it, preferably first thing in the morning, because it gives us that daily snapshot same way that weighing yourself every morning would do. So that's really the right way to use HRV, and it is the single best tool we have in terms of giving us a physiological marker of recovery from the inside out versus an external marker of power output or speed or whatever. Those are the external factors, but we want to understand the internal physiology that's driving that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that, and I know how valuable it is because I've heard you talk about it. I've heard other people talk, about HRV, but most people, I think they're largely unaware, and they're also largely unaware of all of the noise of the HRV measurement that they might be getting from their wearables, right? So that I love the clarity there, and that's massively helpful. So let's say somebody wants more clarity, whether they're just somebody that's building their own program or following a program or something like that, and now they're using, let's say they have the Morpheus band and they're pulling their HRV, they've got Morpheus system kind of helping them program. But what if they just have a huge misunderstanding or large, they don't understand the knowledge enough to be able to actually shift and change programming? Or if it's a coach, right, or a trainer, somebody that has multiple clients, maybe has your iPad, and the iPad program or whatever, that they're able to now see multiple measurements coming across in the Morpheus system. But they're like, all of this stuff is Greek to me. How do I know how to do this, right? Because at some point they've got to now make the rubber meet the road, right? And program correctly. And okay, I put them in the wrong heart zone or heart rate zone or whatever because I really didn't know what I was doing. So whether it's either person, how can they learn, right, to apply this better?
So look, the biggest thing I said is Morpheus takes all this data, the HRV data, the sleep data, the train data, and it turns that into that recovery score for you and the heart rate zones for you. So the biggest thing is really simple. We take recovery score from 0 to 100%. 100% meaning you're fully recovered. You can really do any level of training and be appropriate. And 0%, which means you're probably about to die, and so you should seek medical attention right now. And then basically everything in between there is something you're going to want to use to guide your training. So generally speaking, it's really simple. If you're between about 80 and 100%, you really are in a position to put your body through whatever level of training you want to within reason. If you're somewhere between 40 and 80%, that would show up in Morpheus as an amber color. And it just means your recovery is a bit reduced. And generally speaking, I'm going to say, okay, avoid a ton of volume of high intensity, or avoid it maybe altogether if it's at lower end of that spectrum. And if you're below 40%, it really means do some sort of recovery, regeneration, some sort of activity to get your recovery back to normal. If you just kind of follow those simple guidelines of, when my recovery is already reduced, I want to let my body continue that recovery process. I don't necessarily want to continue to smash myself until I recovered from previous, whatever I was doing to myself. And as long as you kind of follow this, hey, if my recovery is reduced, I'm going to let myself keep recovering before I repeat that process. And if my recovery is really low, I'm going to focus on regeneration strategies. Maybe I'm going to go get a massage. Maybe I'm going to go do a flow tank to relax. Or maybe I'm going to go do, some sort of cryo, something to just get my body jump started a bit. If you can just kind of follow those simple guidelines, you'll see a huge benefit, because most people train in this chronically under-recovered state. And what I mean by that is they're kind of training chronically at this moderate to low recovery. They're never giving their body a chance to fully recover before they hit it again. And so I believe this model called train, recover, repeat, right? So it's really simple. I'm going to train and put my body under stress. I'm going to allow it to recover and see the gains from that. And then I'm going to repeat that over and over again. And so really all you're doing is looking at your recovery score in Morpheus as a guide to make sure you are following that process. And if your body's not recovering, take a little bit step back. And I'm not saying don't train or don't put the work in, but don't put in the high intensity, max effort, balls to the wall, high heart rate training until you have had a chance to recover from the last time you did it. And generally speaking, when we go above 90% of our maximum heart rate or 90% of our maximum lifts, that's where we produce the most stress in our body, because that's where we activate the highest threshold motor units. That's where we put the most stress on the CNS. That's where we put the most stress on the joints. So really what I tell people, like I says, if your recovery is already reduced a bit, try to avoid that or minimize that and allow your body to recover before you come back the next day. And so it doesn't have to be rocket science to use this data if you just use that as your blueprint for how you're going to train and how you're going to adjust training as you go. And if you simply do that, you will typically see your recovery score will average somewhere between 80-85% over the long run, and you'll be on the right track. If you see your recovery score tanking, well, then you're probably either doing too much too often, or your lifestyle factors are playing a big detrimental role too. So you can also just use Morpheus to look at that. And obviously, if your recovery score is low and you're sleeping 6 hours, it's pretty clear how to fix that. So, from a coaching standpoint, like I said, we look at all the different data. It doesn't take a rocket science to see that someone's sleeping 6 hours a night and 5 hours a night, or they're sleeping maybe more than that, but they're super inconsistent in their schedule. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to realize that my training's going to have to be, adjusted accordingly, and I'm going to have a conversation with them about how to fix that and get their life more suitable towards being able to train those higher intensities, because they can recover better from better sleep. So again, it doesn't have to be rocket science. You just have to be able to look at recovery score and make some decisions about what's appropriate and what's not.
Yeah. So then the only person that is probably offended by this is the consummate box checker, right? That's like, no, but the program said that I have to do this workout on this day. But you're basically saying, instead of this paper program, you can still use it, but you're gonna the blueprint isn't this paper program. It's now Morpheus that's saying, okay, yeah, do that workout because that workout is high intensity. Oh, okay, don't do that workout today. Do something lower intensity, or do that workout but do it lower intensity, right? Is that?
Yeah, that's usually what it is. It's usually more of an adjustment or a scaling than it is like, oh, got throughout the whole workout. It's usually like, oh, I had this workout plan, my recovery's a bit reduced, so I'm just gonna do a few less sets, or maybe I'm gonna take off a few reps off the last part, or maybe I'm not gonna try to hit a PR today. It's as long as you're kind of following that process, you shouldn't get yourself in a position where you're just completely trashed to the point where you had a high intensity day planned and you can't get out of bed because your recovery's failed. That only happens if you don't follow the blueprint, right? That only happens if you're not letting yourself recover. If you, generally speaking, let yourself follow that recovery program path, like you're not going to get to the point where you have to throw out a workout. And kind of the way I build my program to start with, I plan for about 2 high intensity sessions a week, because I can tell you, after looking at years of data, 99% of the population cannot fully recover from 3 truly high intensity days a week at any sort of volumes. If you were doing 3 truly high intensity session a day program for over 6-8 weeks, I can tell you, you're not going to improve. You're probably going to go the opposite direction, just based on how our bodies are hardwired. And even pro athletes, like we look at years of success in the combat sports side I've had with guys. We train same process. Sparring is Tuesdays and Saturdays. Those are high intensity days, and that's it. And that's why I think we've had guys like DJ set the record for UFC title defenses, and why we've had so few guys across so many years of combat sports miss fights because of injuries or just fall apart. It's because we recognize that our fighters have to fight, and then fighters have to recover, and the same thing applies to everybody. So when I build my programs, the way I'd recommend people do it, twice a week, plan to push your body to its limits. Twice a week, plan to push it, a moderate amount, but somewhere below that. And twice a week, plan to focus on recovery in your workouts and allowing your body to regenerate. You kind of follow that template. Chances are you're going to see progress more often than not, and you're going to stay healthier along the way.
Yeah, I love that. And I mean, obviously we could go on and on. You might have won the Nerd Award today, but next time I'm going to do my best. But I love it because you've taken what is complex and made it simple, or what can seem complex and made it simple, because you're like, hey, look at these two things, as opposed to, okay, look at this whole crazy smorgasbord of stuff and figure it out, and hopefully you got it, or whatever, whether you're a coach or an end user. So, I mean, that's incredible. So they look at it, iOS or Android, right? They can get it there. And then they can find this information as well on your site. Is it Joel Jamieson or 8 Weeks Out? Or?
8weeksout.com, so everything on there. I've got a course called Recover to Win that teaches them all these recovery strategies like I'm talking about. Train with Morpheus is off 8 Weeks Out, but you can also just go to trainwithmorpheus.com to actually get the Morpheus system that I've been talking about. But yeah, look, at the end of the day, to me, fitness, don't get me wrong, fitness is complicated. There's a lot of things with human performance and physiology are hugely complicated. But in my experience, people need to get the simple things right before they worry about the complicated things. And I've seen people spend just endless hours debating, 3 sets of 5 or 4 sets of 6, like this variation of the lunge versus that variation of the lunge. Like, don't get me wrong, like those are conversations you can have with yourself, but 9 times out of 10 or 9 out of 100, that's not the limiting factor in your fitness, because you're sleeping 6 hours a night and you're eating like shit. Yeah. Is that really, is that one lunge variation going to be the magic bullet that's going to unlock your fitness? Probably not. We need to get the big things right before we focus on the small things and the details. And most people, I can tell you, after looking at hundreds or probably thousands of programs over the year, most people need to master the basics and just get the volumes, intensities, the overall stress, and get enough sleep and get their diet drilled in. Those things are going to cause you to see continual improvements. Those are the big factors that drive results. It's not the 4 sets of 5 versus 5 sets of 5, or the 30 seconds rest versus 45 seconds of rest. Like if you're counting every single set, every single rep, and every single weight and every single rest interval, like, more power to you. But like, those details are a very small piece of a very big puzzle that most people need to spend more of their effort focusing on.
Yeah, it's so funny because I just interviewed Dr. Andy Galpin. Obviously, he's someone to know in the industry for the same reason. He's just looked at so much data and so much information and understands it. And he's saying the same thing. It's like, don't overcomplicate it. If you don't got the simple things right, you're not going to be able to do the complex and more intricate type deals. So now you've heard it. You've heard it here, LivingFit, right? Like, 2 of the most incredible minds in the fitness industry that have looked at thousands and thousands of sheets of data and programs and people, and they're both saying the same thing. And man, what a rad way to leverage technology and bring fitness out of the dark ages, like you said, right, and into the driverless cars and things like that are happening in other industries. I'm appreciative of the work that you do and you've continued to do over the last decade or 2 or 3 to bring fitness.
I'm not that old. Come on, 2 decades. Two decades. I'm not that old.
Well, I mean, I consider the work that we do in high school, right, is like you're starting to understand things, and we're getting it wrong most of the time, but at least we're moving forward.
You're learning, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, there's 2 ways to go about things. Like, you can learn from it or you can not.
Exactly.
And that's about it, right? Yeah. Like, you can figure it out as you go, or you can just keep going.
Yeah.
And I've always kind of treat my failures and my lack of experience as is a way to learn and figure out what I need to get better at. And if you do that over time, then that accumulates and hopefully leads you somewhere better than if you just kind of do the same thing and don't ever try to learn from it.
Exactly, 100%. So kind of the final question, we ask this of everybody at the end of every show, and it's, what is LivingFit to you? And obviously not LivingFit the brand, but LivingFit, just that idea or that sort of nomer, if you will.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think at the end of the day, we're all living for a purpose, and we want to stay here. I think most of us at least want to stay on the earth as long as we can, and we want to be healthy and fit along the way. And so to me, living fit means putting together the 24 hours of the day that it takes to do that. And I was just looking at a really, really good study that looked at different healthy habits, obviously avoiding smoking. It looked at alcohol consumption. It looked at sleep. It looked at activity. And it looked at all these habits in terms of how they correlated as a long-term longitudinal study. It looked at how all these habits correlated to increases in disease-free life expectancy. So not just life expectancy, but health expectancy. How many years you could expect to live on average above the norms, depending on these different things. And what they found is, not surprisingly, these are very additive habits. So just doing one of them, meaning like avoiding smoking, would increase your life expectancy of disease-free life by a couple of years. But if you added then more activity and you added in all these different variables, they were very, additive in nature. So I think the females, women in general, who had all these different habits, they lived 10 more free disease-free years than the average person who didn't have these, which is a significant amount. That's not just 10 years of extra life. That's 10 years of disease-free life. And the men were around 7 years, which is still, 10% of their life was added on. And it was not just, again, bad years, because we've all seen, I don't want to have bad years at the end of my life personally. I want to avoid that as much as I can. I don't want to be falling apart in the last 5 or 10 years on this earth. I'd like to be enjoying them as much as I possibly can. So I think our goals are, perform as well as we can at whatever it is that we're doing when we're young. And then when we're old, we want to enjoy it. We want to stay as healthy as we can. We don't want to go down the road of cancer and cardiovascular disease and stroke and all these things that debilitate people as they age. So, to me, we've got to be smart when we're young so that we can relax and be happy when we're old. And that's what it comes down to, because we're going to pay the price. Our future selves are going to pay the price for what we're doing right to ourselves right now. And if you can take that perspective, the long game, and put together, again, those 24 hours a day to take care of yourself, your 60, 70, 80-year-old self is going to be healthy and happy, is going to thank you for what you're doing now. So to me, that's what living fit now means. It means not just living for right now, but living for those later years in life too, where I can sit on the beach and relax and enjoy myself and take advantage of the work I've done for my life leading up to that point.
I love it. Yeah. And coming from somebody, like you said in the beginning, who's sort of naturally impatient, right? Then that's the extrapolation through all of your work and all of your research and all. And the cool part is you can take an active role in that, so you don't have to wait for it. You can actually, right, through the stuff that you were saying. That's awesome.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you take the right approach, you're going to feel better now. You don't have to wait to feel better later. I mean, you should. To me, that's the ultimate test of fitness. Look, if you're performing at a high level and you're a world-class athlete, like I understand your body's going to go through some wars and you're going to feel the pain and pay the price. But if you're just training to live longer and be healthy and avoid injury and you don't feel good, something's probably broken. Like, you should actually feel good as a result of fitness. And if the answer is like, my back aches, my knee aches, I'm tired, that's not a good sign that your fitness is going the right direction. Right. So maybe they do a little survey of what the mentality behind that is. But I think at the end of the day, you should feel better now. You should feel good now with fitness. Fitness should make you feel and look healthy. It should not make you look or feel unhealthy, because that's, to me, the opposite of fitness. That's a lack of fitness in a lot of ways.
Absolutely. Well, Joel, I just want to say thank you so much. You made some complex stuff seem and sound really simple, and I'm really looking forward to getting my hands on Morpheus and being able to actually use that as a way to simplify the approach, help guide me and direct me, and allow me to do the programs and the intensities and the things that I want to do, while also keeping me from having my ego cash checks that I don't have the money to pay for, right?
Yeah. So there you go. Good Top Gun reference. I like it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much again. Really enjoyed it and absolutely honored. It was a pleasure to have you.
Yeah, it's great to be on. I'm glad we got a chance to talk to you. I hope everyone enjoys it, and I'm sure at some point we'll come back around and talk about what else we've been working on.
Absolutely.